Today we're going to surprise my friend Cheryl and modify her bike. I just told her I was going to tune it up, but we're going to change a few things. So today we're getting experimental. We're going to learn a whole lot about geometry and how to modify bikes and talk about used bikes and how to make more affordable used bikes viable today. I'm lucky enough to be a coach on the local high school mountain bike team here in Sedona, Arizona. And I've met some amazing student athletes and some amazing coaches as well. My buddy Phil is one of those people. I really love Phil. He gives so much heart and soul and energy and time and money and effort to helping the youth in Sedona have a wonderful mountain bike experience. And now it's time to give a little bit back to Phil and his wonderful wife Cheryl, who this year has become a coach on the team as well. Now, mountain bikes are getting extremely expensive, and I'm sure you guys can relate, whether you're getting started in the sport or you're trying to get a friend hooked on mountain biking. And Phil's been riding for a long time, and he wanted to get his wife hooked on mountain biking, but he wasn't willing to drop $6,000 on an entry-level full suspension these days. And so last year he found this used bike. It's an older Specialized Roomer. I don't even know the year, but it's before droppers were commonplace. So today we're going to surprise Cheryl. I told her I just wanted to tune up her bike before the upcoming race, but we are going to modify the geometry and talk about how to get a used bike, an older used bike, riding a little bit more like a modern bike so you can get into the sport cheaper or get a friend into the sport cheaper. All right, the first thing we need to do is measure the current geo. You're going to be surprised if you're a nerd like me at what the geo numbers on this bike are, and it's not from all that long ago. It's a 29er, full suspension, Specialized, fairly modern, but we're gonna see what those numbers look like. Let's throw it on the geometer. Oh my gosh, 69.9. All right, 70-degree head angle, that's super steep. Even XC race bikes aren't that steep anymore. We're seeing stuff closer to 66.5 on that Cannondale Scalpel, all the way up to, I mean, some are still in the 70-degree range, but most are closer to 68, 69 degrees for XC race bikes. And the reason I mention that is because XC race bikes typically don't hit higher speeds that you would hit on flow trails, on enduro races, and just most trails all around. And that's not to say that XC racers aren't fast. They are, and they can ride really fast, but XC races are won on the climbs, not the descents. And so that's where XC bikes focus on. So slow speed stuff where you're just running out of energy and trying to get up that climb, a steeper head angle will help that. So the slower you go, the steeper your head angle will help you balance and not feel like the wheel's flopping. So this bike, even though it's full suspension, even though it's a 29er, even though it's got a good amount of travel, it rides more like an old school XC race bike, which is to say it's great on climbs, it's great on switchbacks, it's great on really slow speed stuff. You got some good balance. But when you start picking up speed, it gets sketchy. That's a twitchy, nervous handling bike with the steep head angle. Now, a lot of people say, you always talk about making bikes slacker. Not every bike needs to be slack. True. But this day and age, we know that bikes with a 70-degree head angle ride far more nervous than a bike with a 68-degree head angle. Cheryl's not racing XC World Cup. She's trying to enjoy the sport and not feel like she's about to die on every ride. So we're going to slacken this out and change the geometry up front. Now, Specialized did a weird thing, and bike companies do this from time to time. They have special headsets that only work in Specialized. And until now, we haven't been able to modify the head angle of a Specialized. We're going to be using 9.8's slacker angle adjusting headset, which will make this headset 1.5 degrees slacker. In theory, we're going to test it. And then we're going to send this back to Cheryl, not tell her that we modified anything, and see if she notices it or rides it any better than before. I'm excited to see if a total novice can tell the difference between a 1.5 degree head angle between so this will probably be 68.5 and is currently at 70. I would definitely notice a difference. I think almost everybody watching this video would notice a difference if you could do it back to back. All right, let's get this thing torn down and get that slacker in here. I want to say a few things here. Slacker's not always better. In this case, for almost every single human, slacker than 70 degrees is good. But a lot of people will write me on my bike consultation service and say, hey, my bike has a 66-degree head angle and I ride in Minnesota and it's pretty flat, but I need a slacker bike. And they actually don't need a slacker bike. 66 is great for out there. So even though I harp on older hardtails having steep head tubes, that doesn't necessarily mean that slacker's better for everyone. So don't just buy that hook, line, and sinker that every bike needs to be slacker. If you're going faster, if you're sending it a little more, if you're getting an old bike with really old geo, slacker is better. So that's what we're focusing on today. So I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a groove grooved into this. This is why I don't like integrated headsets. If that gets gouged or damaged, the frame's done. Now, it'll be okay for our uses, but I like bikes to be reusable for years and years and years and years, and pressing in a cup would have been way better than running this garbage. Now, here's one thing I like to do. These have a little notch in them. I highlight it white so I can see it. It's really going to be necessary to see that in a minute, and so I just use a paint pen and mark it. Now, basically, here's how it works. This threads into here, and it's reverse threaded, and this threads into here, and it's forward threaded. And these are ovalized. So here you can see it's thicker over here and thinner over here. And what it does, we screw it in here and it kicks your fork out like that. That's what a slacker head angle means. So by screwing this in, we're going to reposition new cups in a new angle and orientation so that the front wheel gets pushed out, and that's going to help it on steeper terrain. That's going to help it at its higher speed. It's going to give it a longer wheelbase. It's going to be a lot less twitchy. So we're going to Loctite these threads and put it all together and get it all centered in there. Now we're going to test fit. Oh, this doesn't quite fit. It's a little bit small. This happened on my Chameleon install too. Darn, that's really too bad. I guess companies don't standardize how big around the inside of their integrated cups are. Yep, I'm gonna have to grind both of these out. Okay, that's next. So I need to open that up and widen it out. We had to do this on the Chameleon too, and this is where most people give up. And frankly, you probably should give up if you've never done anything like this. I've got a cone, stone cone on my angle grinder. This is gonna keep it centered, and I just need to make it maybe 2 millimeters wider. Cheryl's never going to let me tune up her bike again, I'll tell you that. Okay, now I need to do the same with the bottom, but this cone is a little too small. I need to find my larger cone. This bike is well past its warranty anyway. All right, need to do a little more. Now here on the lower cup, I had to machine out quite a bit in here. It just was a really thick cup there. This is the third slacker I've installed, and we did an Orbea Laufey, a Santa Cruz Chameleon, and now this. And on all of them, I've had to grind. It's meant to be a simple drop-in installation, but there's no standard for the inner size of that hole, unfortunately. So this one took a lot of grinding. Now these are supposed to just drop in, which they do now that I've clearanced them, and I only clearanced the center so that this could slip right past it. I didn't touch the angle of the cup, so I could still reinstall all the original bearings in this and it'd be just fine. Now 9.8 recommends cleaning everything out like we did and then installing friction paste. This is like grease with gritty little glass beads in it. It feels like sandy grease, which seems so wrong to be putting in here, but it actually allows the 9.8 slacker to grip in here and not slide around. Now, if you install it with this and then you get creaks or squeaks, I've had buddies take it apart and just use grease and have better luck with that. Now, I've used fiber grip with no problems, and it was creak free, but I just wanted to mention that if your frame happens to creak with this, try grease, and then some people try no grease. One of those three combinations will get you a creak free installation. Now we're going to put this spacer in the lower cup, and remember these thread backwards. We're going to do one turn on there, and we find the little white mark that I marked and put it toward the back. Beautiful. And then we put this mark to the back and install this one full turn. All right. And now we take the provided tool and we snug everything up. You kind of want to hold it while you do this so that none of these cups spin. And this is just cinching everything down. We're basically giving this bike new headset cups. And you want to make sure that these cups stay straight. All right, now we just torque it to spec. And this has essentially replaced the old integrated cups with the new cups that are going to kick it out, make it a 1.5 degree slacker. All right, we got our slacker cups installed. This is pretty exciting that they went through all that trouble just to make a special model just for Specialized, because Specialized did their own weird thing. Kudos to 9.8 for inventing this and making it work with these Specialized. It's going to open up a lot of doors for other Specialized owners. Now it's just time to reassemble the headset. Put the headset back in here, put the fork back on, and get it going. Now, shopping for used bikes is extremely tricky. You really have to know your stuff. You have to know your geo. You have to know your standards. You have to know the difference between 148 mil spacing and 142 mil spacing. And understanding that it takes a lot of time. And unfortunately, most people that are looking for used bikes don't have that skill set because they're new to the industry and new to the sport. So my main business, apart from making YouTube videos and educating people about hardtails, is bike consultation. Over on patreon.com/hardtailparty, I have a page where if someone's looking to get a new bike or needs help picking my brain, whether it's a hardtail or full suspension, I work with them to help get a list of bikes that would be great for them, and then we work together to narrow that list down. A lot of people don't know this, but I consult with used bikes as well. So if your budget's $1,500, I'm probably going to point you toward a used bike rather than a brand new $1,500 bike, so your dollar can stretch a little bit more. Now, shopping used bikes takes a lot of skill and a lot of experience. If you don't know standards and geometry charts and what's 148 boost versus 142 mil or quick release dropout versus 12 millimeter through axle, if this is all shooting over your head, you could really mess up buying a used bike and overpay, or even worse, buy the wrong bike for you and what you need. So we lucked out with this one with Cheryl. I've been consulting with Phil and we've been working a lot, and ever since this slacker came out, I've been dying to install it on here to make this bike a little bit happier for Cheryl. So part of my service includes helping people with used bikes. A lot of people will send me Pink Bike and Facebook and Craigslist ads and say, hey, I found this bike. Would this be a good fit? I'll help them out. I'll look at the geo. I'll look at their intended use. And I'll help them sort through all those used bikes to know which one's good. So if you could benefit from some used bike help, you don't have $2,000 to $3,000 to $4,000 for a modern, great, brand new hardtail, and you're getting into the sport or someone else is getting into it, or you just have a smaller budget and you're okay with a pre-owned bike, that's part of my service, is helping people navigate the confusing world of used bikes. So if you want that, sign up. I'd love to help you over there. It takes a lot of time and a lot of patience, but I love helping people get good used bikes for fair prices. All right, let's put this thing back together and see how the geo changed. Now we grease our headset cups just like normal. We put the bearings on. These bearings will just pop right in. Beautiful, like a glove. Moment of truth. Beautiful. Now you'll notice we have lost some room in here because the slacker takes up about an extra 10 mil at the bottom and an extra 10 mil at the top. So we're not going to be able to run the spacers we ran before. That's okay. This steer tube is just long enough to make it. But if your steer tube's cut super, super short, it could be a problem for you. I don't know if you can tell, but I can definitely see that slacker. Definitely. So the front center's just like it sounds. It's the front half of the bike. And the longer that is, the less likely you are to go over the bars or to get bound up. So at speed, this longer, wider bike is gonna have a little bit more wheelbase to kind of roll through stuff and get hung up less. Really excited for this for Cheryl. And then let's check what we all came here for, which is the head angle. It was, oh my gosh, it was 69.9 before. We're now at 68.4. So that was exactly 1.5 degrees, just like it was claimed from 9.8. Awesome. Huge upgrade. Most people can feel a difference of 1/2 to 1 degree. 1.5 degree is going to be noticeable. I'll bet even to Cheryl. I don't know if she's going to be able to pinpoint what feels different, but I think we're going to see a lot more confidence on her on this bike. So we took this old school Geo bike that's still totally worth getting and totally worth riding and can get her by for a couple years to get hooked on this sport, but to do so safely. Here in Sedona, the terrain that we have, a slacker head angle like 68.5 does much better than the original 70 degree head angle. So even though I made it slacker, it's still not slack by any modern stretch of the imagination. The new Specialized Epic Evo, which is an XC trail bike, has a 66 degree head angle. Even modern race XC bikes are slacker than this. So we didn't go crazy, but it should really wake this bike up. Now I'm going to do some smaller things to really make this bike easier for her to use and a little bit more likely for her to succeed as she rides this thing. Cheryl's husband, Phil, has done some really sensible upgrades on this. This used to have a 2x drivetrain, a 2x10, and what he did was he got a 32-tooth chainring and then an Advent X 10-speed drivetrain. That's under $180, and it ditched the 2x setup, and now it's a 1x10 with almost the same range as Eagle for much, much less of the price. And so it shifts really well. I'm going to get this dialed in and get this shifting just perfect for her, because a lot of newer riders don't love, nobody loves hearing click, 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 click in the back. And if it's doing that, a lot of new riders hesitate to shift because they feel like something's broken and they're going to hurt something. They're not. But if I get that derailleur just tuned up perfectly, she's going to feel like she has liberty to shift whenever she wants. And she should. Anyone should feel that way on a bike. You should shift whenever you need the gear and not have this little voice in the back of your head saying, your shifter's off, you probably shouldn't shift yet. So I'm going to get that dialed in. Another thing that's super important is cockpit. Women especially, and I know Cheryl, have smaller hands. And one size does not fit all on these brake levers. Sometimes you're right here reaching out pretty far to get to it. So we're going to adjust these in so the lever starts right here so she doesn't have to reach so far. I'm also going to bleed the brakes. I'm going to scrub the rotors and get all the old brake material off. I'm going to sand that off. I'm going to sand down my pads and just refresh the brakes, because a crisp, clean braking bike is a happy bike. Now, another sensible thing Phil did was he added this KS lev dropper. Now, it doesn't have a ton of drop because Cheryl has short legs like me. And this frame, the seat tube came up kind of high, so you don't have very many options. And the frame isn't routed internally for a dropper, so he had to get creative and go with an older style external cable mounted dropper, which was just the right decision for this bike. So she can still experience having a dropper, which is one of the most important things on a bike for new mountain bikers, in my opinion. And so he got her that. And then finally, he got her the Specialized Mimic saddle, which is a women's specific saddle. And my wife, who runs the Dusty Betty YouTube channel, says nothing compares. For women, if you want them to have a good experience, get them a women's specific saddle. Even if you have to spend $100 to $150 doing it, it will be worth every penny and will greatly increase the likelihood that she likes riding. I'm also going to go through and I'm going to fine tune the suspension for Cheryl. I'm going to go through, clean it up a little bit, drain all the air, start all over again, get the air at the right pressure, lube up the seals, and just get this thing riding really great so that she feels like she got this refreshed new bike that's ready for her. And that's going to increase her likelihood of loving the sport and not fighting her equipment to have a good time, but rather letting her equipment do its job so that she can focus on the trail and being in nature and being with her husband who she loves and being with the kids who she loves coaching and just having a great time out there. And we're going to try to make the bike erase from underneath her so she isn't thinking about the bike and she's thinking about everything else. So a few other things that Phil has done a great job is getting her some good comfy grips. These are the Ergon GA3. For people that get a lot of numbness in their wrists, a lot of people like these little wings. They can support the palm of their hand on them and not get so many vibrations to make their wrist numb. And he also got her some excellent pedals, race face chesters. Good pedals are a must for new riders to love this sport. Now, brakes have come a long way in recent years, so these aren't the best. These are Tektro Geminis. They've got mineral oil in them, so I can bleed them, They're okay, they're hydraulic, but they're not the most powerful. So we're gonna do some little things here. These are just old and tired. There's a lot of slop in the lever, but we're gonna do our best. Almost every brake lever on higher end brakes has this little screw in here. This is a 2mm, and watch what happens to the lever distance as I screw it in. As I screw it in, it moves away, and as I screw it out, it brings the lever in. Watch. Ever so slightly, it brings it in closer to the bars. Now, a lot of people don't do this for women, but you should. And it has less to do with women, but more to do with people with short fingers. So now to reach it, I'm not reaching so far, I can just grab right there. Now I need to bleed these to get a little bit more pad adjustment, but that's an important adjustment to do. Another important adjustment is bar roll and lever position for the shifter. Getting all of that dialed will help take the complication out of it for a new rider. And it takes an experienced rider to be able to do that. I'm going through the gears here, and there's a lot of resistance to push to shift. That's no fun for a new rider. So usually that means there's a weird kink or a fray in the housing. So I'm going to replace the shift housing and the shift cable and get that shifting real nice for her. To do that, I'll just pull the old one out and then use it for length for the new one. All right, it's totally done. Let me walk you through some things that I've done and some things that make this bike more modernized and more likely to help Cheryl have an enjoyable first year on her mountain bike. Women's saddle, dropper post, 1x10 conversion. Phil did all of those. Great job, Phil. I trued the wheels. I deglazed the rotors and pads. I just sanded both of them. They're feeling much better now. They're not squeaking front and rear. I installed that slacker. It's a 1.5 degree slacker head angle now. So it's at 68.4, which is still plenty steep. You're not going to confuse it for an enduro bike. I went all through the fork and got the fork running really good, lubed it up, got it cleaned up. I bled the rear brake. I replaced all the housing on the shifter. It shifts effortlessly now. I adjust the B tension. This thing is ready to go. And I think it's the little things that's going to make a difference for her. Like the shifting is going to be easier on the thumb. It's just going to click real nice. The bike's going to be nice and quiet. Derailleur's not going to be clicking. I lube the chain. It's just going to ride smoothly. I don't think she's going to notice the head angle. Obviously, she's not thinking about geometry and head angle. But what I want to notice is if I notice it from riding behind her, if she's bouncing around less on the trail and like losing her line, and if she's just able to kind of stay in the middle of the single track and ride with a little bit more confidence, especially on the downhills. I wish the steer tube had been a centimeter longer. That would have made me feel better to be able to run a spacer on top. It's fine how it is, but it's close. So if they ever upgraded the fork on this, I'd get one with an extra centimeter. I think she might notice the look of the slacker. Like, you're always staring at this part of your bike when you're riding it. It's a centimeter taller. She might notice that. I'm curious. I told Phil I was doing it, but I didn't tell Cheryl I was doing it. And once again, everything's totally reversible. If she loved the 70-degree head angle, we can put everything back to how it was. But everyone I've talked to that's run a slacker has said, you couldn't pay me to put it back to how it was. I love how it is now that I'm used to it. So there it is. Really fun getting old bikes a little bit more modernized and more ready for the trail to help newer riders enjoy this sport without breaking the bank. If you need help finding a used bike, I don't do the searching for you, but if you want to send me the ads that you find and you want my opinion on them, I do that through my bike consult service. It's been such a pleasure to be able to give back to a woman who gives so much to our team, and to Phil, who gives so much to our team. He cooks our team meals every single race, probably 3 or 4 meals a weekend. He gives his heart and soul. Even though his kid has moved on, he continues giving back to the cycling community here. And it's been an absolute pleasure to give back in a very, very small way back to Phil and Cheryl. I also want to thank 9.8 for providing the slacker for this build to get her stoked on this new bike. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bikes are awesome. The people you meet when you're riding are awesome. Hardtails are awesome. There's a party in the mountains, and you're invited.